Although I hope to come to you soon, I'm writing you these instructions so that, if I'm delayed, you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and foundation of the truth. Beyond all question, the mystery from which true godliness springs is great. He appeared in the flesh, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed on in the world, was taken up in glory.
My name is Joshua Millard. I'm from the Church Missionary Society. I'm the Youth Development Director at CMS, and it is a joy to see you all again once in this fabulous church of yours. This morning I will be preaching from the Bible, don't worry, but I'll also be telling you a few things about CMS as well. If you haven't heard from us, I'd love to chat to you after the service, say hi, tell you all about us, and to hear all about you too. So my wife and I, we are expecting our first child sometime in the next 6 weeks. Oh, thank you very much. And all we know is that we have no idea what it will be like. We know that it's a big change, that lots of things will be different, but we will yet to sort of discover the way that this is going to reshape our lives. And I am haunted by my past self and this advice that I have so happily and readily dished out over many years to so many people, which is that every time you have a life stage change, something in your life shifts, you need to reorder your discipleship practices. And now that it's happening to me, I'm not really sure what to do. But I think it's still good advice. If you shift from primary school to high school, you need to reorder your discipleship practices. The way that you're a Christian needs to make a bit of a shift. When you change from high school to go into university or take a gap year or enter into a trade, you need to reorder your discipleship practices. Everything should stay the same in your following Jesus, but how you do that as your life changes needs to adjust as your life adjusts to new things. When you get your first full-time job, you need to reorder your discipleship practices. When you get married, you need to reorder your discipleship practices. When you move cities to where suddenly you don't know anyone anymore, you've got to reorder your discipleship practices. When you become a full-time carer unexpectedly, you'll have to reorder your discipleship practices. When you retire, when something big in your life changes, when you go through great grief again and again, you need to reorder things. And when Paul writes to Timothy and to the church in Ephesus, he's saying something similar to the church, but of course a bit more profoundly than I'm putting it. Because some things appear to have changed since Paul was there last. And he says that in chapter 1, you get this picture that some false teaching has entered into the church and coming to value some things that the culture values in particular ways has shifted the church to change what it loves and treasures and values. So you can see in chapter 1, there's this idea of this false teaching. In chapter 4, we get a sense that there's this not valuing and not seeing as good God's created world. In chapter 6, you get this sense that this cultural value on secret or special knowledge has really seemed to infect the church. So Paul says, well, when you find the mould in the house of God of heresy, you'll have to shift things. You'll have to reorder your discipleship practices. You need to get back on track. As they've been Christians for long enough that they might begin to miss the brightness of the gospel, they need to reorder their discipleship practices. As they find themselves under the influence and pressure of culture, they need to realign themselves. And so Paul tells them all to reorder the household. In chapter 1, they are to celebrate the church as a company of sinners, forgiven and changed. In chapter 2, they have to learn how to pray for their fallen world that's still under God's rule. In chapter 3, they have to appoint leaders whose conduct mirrors Christ. And in chapter 4, they have to learn to follow the example of Christian leaders and set each other an example. In chapter 5, they have to learn how to take care of each other's financial needs according to the work they can do. In chapter 6, they have to spend money, learn to spend money and not spend money in ways that show everyone that the enjoyment of God's world does not depend on what you can buy. So in all these ways, in other ways, Paul's telling them you've got to reorder your discipleship. And in chapter 3, we meet the midpoint of this letter. It's the topical turning point. And Paul, he says, if I can't make it there, you've got what you need to know in order to reorder your practices of discipleship. You can be guided by this statement of faith in order to conduct yourselves well. Ordering it along these lines will credit God with honour and testify to the watching world of his goodness. Great is the mystery from which godliness springs. But this mystery is now revealed in Jesus Christ. It's what makes us godly or religious in that old sense of that word, of a way of life belonging to a particular group of people. So Paul gives them a quote. If you're following along in your Bible, you can see it there, verse 16 of chapter 3. You can see that it's sort of indented or it's formatted differently. The way you might sort of format a poem or maybe format a song or formatting a statement of faith that the church might say together. And nobody knows where on earth it comes from. But it seems to be something that the church would say or recite or believe. Paul quotes it because he's saying, you know, this thing we agree on, remember this. You remember this, right? This is how we do it. This is how we order the way that we follow Jesus together. And the message is so straightforward in one sense. Order your discipleship around Jesus's victory. And it enables us to be able to ask ourselves if this is what we're doing. Are we living in the way that we sing about our Saviour? Does the coming of Christ, does the resurrection of Christ, does his ascension, does his proclamation, does his reign shape how we're living together? In their city in Ephesus and in our city in Melbourne. So those lines sort of rehearse everything about Jesus that's most important. He's coming, he's conquering death, he's being proclaimed, he's reigning now. So just that first line, for example, that he was revealed in the flesh or he appeared in the body. The question the church is left to ask themselves is if the way they're following Jesus reflects that. Because imagine together if we ignored that line in the way that we follow Jesus. I mean, in our time, in our place, in Melbourne here and now, if we ignored that, well, that could have all kinds of disastrous consequences, especially in a world of AI. It could have all kinds of consequences in a world where children are simultaneously valued and dismissed. It could have all kinds of consequences where disability and age are economically inconvenient. Maybe the way that we follow Jesus needs to limit technology. Maybe the way that we follow Jesus needs to include everyone in our life. Maybe the way that we follow Jesus needs to pay the costs of limiting our own powers. So I'm Youth Development Director at CMS, and it's sort of my job to try and help people who work in youth ministry to be thinking through that carefully and doing that well. If you wanted like the LinkedIn version of my job title, it's Youth Ministry Consultant. It's not really, but you know, that's the sort of things we try to do to help the churches. And imagine what it's like to be a young person now. It's pretty tough. Imagine growing up in a world where you don't remember there wasn't AI. And now it's here. So for adolescents now, they will have to spend their entire lives trying to think about what it means to follow Jesus in a world of AI. And to think about it, because it becomes the normal standard. This technology has been used for all kinds of interesting things, in ways that don't acknowledge human limits, in ways that depersonalise relationships, all kinds of interesting consequences. And it's not evil. No one needs to kind of panic. I mean, I think it's evil actually, but that's another conversation. No one needs to panic or worry about it, you know. I'm not trying to be a Luddite. But it shows us again that actually our discipleship has to continually be reoriented in the world we actually live. And Paul gives this little quotation to help us see by what standard we do that. Now, we could go through each of these lines, but the Church Missionary Society might just jump to the middle ones. Because I was amazed to discover, it was only earlier this year, I just happened to be reading through Timothy, and I'd never seen this before. I'd never bothered to notice that the worldwide proclamation of Christ is one of these features of normativity that Paul gives to the church so it can do this process of remembering what it is. This is the early days of the church. This is its early life together. And it said from the very beginning that proclaiming Christ to the ends of the earth is what we are and how we must live. It is who we are. It is not something that churches do when they have money left over in the budget. Not that churches ever have money left over in the budget, but you know what I mean. It is not something that we just come to when we have time. It is not something that we come to when it is kind of possible. This passage doesn't treat global mission as one of the optional extras for those few churches out there who are absolutely crushing it. Paul is writing to a church that he knows has problems, really significant problems. The mould of heresy is found inside the house. This is going to need a lot of work to deal with. This is not written to a church that has itself all together. It's in the process of getting it together, in the process of refitting itself and reordering its discipleship. So the church is not fit and then it acts for global mission. It needs to get fit and therefore be oriented to the international proclamation of Jesus Christ. Now, I visit a lot of churches. I have a lot to do with a lot of people who work in ministry. Churches in Melbourne are dealing with a degree of struggle. You know, I know it well. My own church has some budget issues. Our staff are very tired. In many churches, clergy are overworked with the things they never signed up to do. It's not always easy in schools to get a lunchtime group going. Sure, those things are real. They are real challenges that need to be met. But our conviction at the Church Missionary Society is that churches get healthier by zooming out and looking at what God is doing in the whole world, in all his churches, in places far from here. Our conviction is that less focus on our problems, as real as they are, and more focus on the fact that Jesus is being believed on throughout the whole world is helpful. And we're not unsympathetic to the real struggles, but we are unsympathetic to an attitude that says we're just doing it too tough to be prayerful for the church in Indonesia and Ecuador. That would be pretty hard to fess up to our Christian family doing ministry there. In fact, we are healthier when we are connected to the shared weakness of the global Christian church. I'll tell you a story about two of our missionaries, Chris and Julie Dean. They work in Timor-Leste, and they were the first missionaries to return when I started working for CMS, and we get this sort of staff briefing when they first come back. And they had some incredibly wonderful things to say, but one of the things that struck me most was that Chris and Julie shared how the Timorese Christians helped them become more prayerful. The Timorese Christians helped Chris and Julie to see the weakness of their own prayer lives. And they didn't identify this weakness in themselves until they met them and spent time with them. They were just amazed at how prayerful Timorese Christians are. They had no idea that you might pray as often and about as many things and the kinds of ways that they would pray. And so they took on that weakness and they shared with the Timorese Christians their theological weakness. You can see in Chris and Julie's updates and the times they've shared that they spend lots of time teaching church leaders how to read the Bible and how to teach others to read the Bible. And when you look at the work that they do and the resources that they create, honestly, they're things that I bet you most people in this room could do right now. Seeing the Bible as one big picture, reading each story in line as a version of the gospel in miniature, learning to see the big picture in each of the details. I reckon any evangelical church in Melbourne could do that today and could have some go at teaching someone else how to read the Bible. And so they enrich one another. They take on and meet each other's challenges and weaknesses and strengths and gifts, and they bless one another. As they work there, the material weaknesses of the churches in Dili are through them shared with the material excesses of Melbourne churches, and it makes us all healthier. The needs of mission across the world are enormous. It's sort of hard to comprehend how much need is in the world. And at CMS Victoria, we have all kinds of challenges like finance and increasing compliance demands, managing the partnerships with the many people on the ground in many different locations. But you know, the essential challenge before us is how few people are putting up their hand to explore if mission is for them. We need more missionaries. We have a declining number of people on the field. Next year we have 2 people coming home to finish up their term of service, and we're not sure if we have anyone to send. We need more missionaries. There aren't people ready to step into those positions that are finishing, but the global need isn't going away. It is ever present. And what are those needs? Well, there is so much need in the world and the worldwide church for things that I think we would consider very basic. I'll tell you a story. I used to be the chaplain at Deakin University, and our church was trying to do some mission work there to connect with students. And I spent a lot of time with international students and with the Christian Union group there as well. So I would join them on their evangelistic events and things they did on campus. And I walked up to this student and I said, "Hi, we're having bubble tea over here, getting to meet some people. Would you like to come over?" And I got to know her. Her name was Sakura. She was an international student from Japan. And she didn't really know anything about Christianity, but her grandfather had been a Christian. And this had somehow become disconnected from her. She connected in with the Christian Union. She went along to their events. She heard the gospel. She believed the gospel. She became a Christian. And she went back to Japan a Christian. That is wonderful. But one of the great challenges is, which our missionaries in Japan, some of our missionaries in Japan, Matt and Bex Uwe, shared with us, is that there are so few people in the church in Japan that Sakura has to return to who can teach her how to read the Bible herself and can support her through those first stages of being a Christian on home soil. And in Japan, there is a lot of social pressure not to be a Christian. So great work happened here. Wonderful things. Things that we ought to support and rejoice in. But it is for her inevitably connected to a worldwide church. Who will be there to meet her, to take her under their wing and support her in the long journey of being a follower of Jesus in a culture where it's tough to do so? So what do we need? We need people with basic Bible teaching skills. The church there is old. It is scattered very far apart from one another. They don't have the resources they need for basic things. We need children's ministry workers in Cambodia. Tim and Olivia Mulheron, one of the things that Olivia has faced as she goes back is she has to basically lead their entire Sunday school ministry. They didn't really know that when they went there. But there isn't this kind of established, well-understood system in churches for teaching children about the Bible. And the fact that everybody can do that. Everybody can play a part there. Most missionaries are still going to places where the church is able to reach its local population, so like reached people groups. And what we really don't have is nearly enough people who are going to unreached people groups, to partner with the local church for the people next door in the town or village or whatever over the hill who will go and proclaim the gospel to them and help the church become established. These are great needs, and we do not have enough people to go. But they are often not more complicated skills than you probably have in your day job. They are reachable goals. They are doable things. It is never simple, but it is doable. This passage reminds us that there is a church out there. He was believed on throughout the world. He is believed on throughout the world. But it is a church in need of support. So, maybe, go and do the hardest thing, the craziest thing, the most unimaginable thing, and see if global mission is for you. Are you an accountant? Well, that could get you into some interesting places. Were you ever part of AFES? We always need more people to go as student workers. Are you a fitness trainer? We have people on location who use that skill to do good work in poor communities, meet people, build relationships so they can do exactly the same thing you're doing here in Ormond to find an opportunity to tell someone about Jesus. And they all need our prayer. They all need our financial support. They all need our care and interest in their work, and they need people to join them on the ground in the work of mission. And when any church in the world does that, they find out more and more how rich this little bit that Paul writes to Timothy is. Great is the mystery of our religion. Great is the mystery from which godliness springs. He was preached among the nations, believed on throughout the world. Paul is not saying that everyone in Ephesus should get out of Ephesus and go and be missionaries. No, he's telling the church how to become established once more. CMS is not telling all of you to get out of Ormond and go and be missionaries. Paul is giving instructions about how the church reorders its discipleship once more as the household of God. So how can all the church in Ephesus let the preaching of Christ to the nations be part of their godliness? By praying regularly and deeply, by supporting the missionaries of Christ's church with hospitality and kindness, and exactly the same as the New Testament church did for Paul and those sent with the message to bear the cost for each other, real monetary cost. Pray for this mission, pray for more missionaries, and pray for yourselves with the needs and burdens of the global church, that your hearts would grow larger for them. CMS thanks you for your support. We are glad and privileged to be in a partnership of mutual encouragement with you, the saints at Ormond. Our plea is to not lose sight of the worldwide church and the lost world that surrounds her on every side. Your mission here, others pray for. Pray for their mission there. Let me finish with the faith by which we must reorder our discipleship once more. He appeared in a body, was vindicated by the Spirit, was seen by angels, was preached among the nations, was believed on in the world, was taken up in glory. Amen.